Welcome back to our Google Apps tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about Google Calendars and how you can use that to manage your schedule in a very easy and effective way. So the basic function for calendar is, of course, simply creating an event. And so to start with, we're just going to use the quick event creation function. So I'm going to click on the time and date that I want my meeting to, or my event to occur. So let's say I want to schedule an event for tomorrow at 8 a.m. So I'll just click on that here, and I'll type in the name of my event. Let's just say I want to schedule a meeting. And you'll see that there's two functions creation, which is meeting and then choosing which calendar it comes on. And we'll come back to calendars in just a minute. So then if I want to put in more detail, I'll go to Edit Event. And up here, I can choose the date and times that I want my event to occur, when it starts, and then, of course, when it ends. Let's say that maybe this is an all-day event, so it doesn't have a particular time frame, but it's just happening all day. I can choose that option, and so then the times will disappear, and I'm left with just the dates. If this is a multi-day event, then you can choose the date that it starts and the date that it ends. But for now, we're just going to stick with our 8 a.m. meeting. Now, let's say that this is a recurring meeting, so maybe it's a staff meeting, or maybe you're putting your class schedule on here. You can choose repeat and very easily get that added to your calendar throughout an extended period of time. So let's say this is a weekly meeting that occurs every week. So you'll choose those two options. This is the day of the week that it occurs on. If it's a meeting that occurs on more than one day in the week, you can choose which days you want that to appear on. Down here, you can choose when that ends. So let's say, for example, if you're putting your class schedule up here and you only want this on there to the end of the semester, you can choose for it to end on and then go pick the last day of the semester. And so that way the event will appear on your calendar every Wednesday or every whichever day that you choose until you tell it to no longer do that. Let's say that this, if it's not a weekly thing, maybe you can choose some other options as well. Maybe it's a daily occurrence that you put on here, like you're scheduling your time at the gym. Maybe it's a monthly, maybe it's a yearly. If you're scheduling classes, it actually is set up so that you can choose every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or every Tuesday, Thursday. So that can be a real quick way to add your class schedule to your calendar. So let's say for now I'm just going to have this be a recurring event on Thursday at 8 a.m. and I'm going to hit done. Coming down here, you can choose your location. Now, Gmail or Google is connected to Google Maps, so if you start to type in the name of a physical location, let's say University of North Carolina at Greensboro, it'll start to populate actual physical places that you can see here. But for me, let's say the meeting is just in Reynolds 110. So if we come down here, now you can choose which calendar you want to put it on. So if you have edit access or the ability to add things to multiple different calendars, you'll see that all of those will appear here. And it's really important to be conscious of which calendar you're choosing. And by default, it's going to go to the calendar that's associated with your email account. But let's say maybe you're also on a staff calendar, an events calendar, and you're trying to add something to that calendar. You need to make sure that you choose the correct one. Otherwise, it's just going to appear on your calendar and no one else is going to see it. Then you can put in a description of what your event's going to be about. So let's say this is a meeting to talk about RA training. And that will kind of be the description associated with your event. Let's say you have an agenda for your meeting. You can actually attach that to the event. And that way, when you invite other people, they'll be able to download that agenda. If you like to color code your events, you can do that down here. So maybe you want all of your meetings to be in blue, all of your classes to be in green, and all of your organizational commitments to be in orange, and all of your personal things to be in purple. So this is a meeting, I'll just put it in blue, and again, this is completely optional for folks that like to have color coordination on their schedule. Notifications, so this is where you get an alert prior to an event coming up. So you can either receive that as a pop-up, which means anytime it's on you have your calendar open, it's going to send you a little pop-up on the screen, or if you have your calendar synced to your smartphone, it'll also send you a notification on your smartphone. You can also choose to have that as an email. Most people tend to prefer the pop-up. You can choose how long before. By default, it's 15 minutes, but you can set it 30 minutes, an hour, however much time you feel like you need that notification. And you can actually do multiple notifications, so maybe if you want to send it another reminder a little bit closer to if you're someone who tends to be forgetful or just needs multiple reminders. Now, if you want to invite a guest to your event, you can do that over here by typing in their email address. So let's say I want to invite my supervisor. I can do that, and he'll pop up down there, and then when I save this event, he'll get an invitation. Another feature that you might use, let's say you need to schedule a meeting with multiple people, so I'm going to take this off. I can click on Find a Time, and so I need to meet with multiple people. Let's say I want to meet with Chris Gregory, Megan Delph, and Coretta Walker. You can see here that what the Find a Time does is it starts to line up all of our schedules right next to each other, either in day view, I can do it in a week view, and this enables me to quickly identify a time that all of us are available. So you simply look for that white space. So it looks like we may have to move our meeting to 11 a.m. on Thursdays because that's the only time that all 4 of us happen to be available. And you'll notice up here that it automatically changes that information in your event details. So I come back over here, and I'm going to hit Save. Now, what it's going to do is pop up and say, hey, do you want to send invitations to your guests? And if you want them to get that notice, then you definitely want to hit Send. And I'm not going to do that right now because this is a test, and I don't want them to actually get an invitation. So I'm going to take them back off. The other thing to remember about the Find a Time function is that it's only effective if the people that you are inviting actively manage their Google Calendar. Otherwise, you may not see their actual commitments reflected on there. So depending on who you're working with, make sure you check with them before you use that function. So that's the basics of creating an event. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And so now you will notice that it now appears here on my calendar for 11 a.m. It's in blue as I told it to be, or a darker blue, and you'll see that it has appeared in on all future weeks during that same day of the week and time. So that is the basics of creating an event. Now, one of the things that I want to do, and of course you can come back and edit this at any point. So I need to change the details of it for whatever reason. Now, what I'm going to go ahead and do is delete this. And I actually want to delete all of them. There we go. And another thing that you can do in terms of the kind of quick view of creating an event is if you don't want to go in to edit those details, but you need to give a little bit more information than simply the time. Or for example, let's say I need to go into month view and schedule a meeting in September. I can click on it from this view and see right here I don't have any details. But if I type in the name of the event, the time at which I want it to occur, and the location, and then I hit create, Google is going to automatically recognize my time that I chose as well as my location. So by default, it will set that meeting for an hour, but again, you can change that as well. If I wanted to do this again and say meeting from 9 to 11 a.m. in conference room, it will again recognize that you have chosen that location. So that's just a handy way to do things really quickly. So going back to our main interface here, the next thing that I want to talk about are the types of calendars that you have over here in your left-hand column. So the ones that are listed on My Calendar, these are all the calendars over which you have complete administrative access. So of course you have your personal calendar that's associated with your email account, birthdays and anniversaries, that's something that's built into the contacts function in Google, your task list if you're using that, and so those are the calendars that are automatically there. And then any calendar that you create or any calendar that someone gives you administrative access over will automatically appear over on this list. And so you can highlight and click on those, and they will start to appear or not appear depending on your preference. So if you're someone that manages multiple calendars, That's a good way to view all that information simultaneously. In addition to your personal calendars, you have other calendars. Now, these are all of the calendars that someone maybe has given you edit access or view access over, but you don't have full administrative access, meaning you can't edit the settings, you can't share that calendar with other people. So those will populate over here. In addition, this is where you can view other people's calendars. So much like Gmail, this is built into the university directory. So anyone at UNCG, if I wanted to see their calendar, I could start typing in that email and it would start to pop up. So let's say, for example, I want to know what my supervisor has on his schedule for this week. So unless that person has given you the right to see the details of their event, by default it's just going to pop up as busy or free. But you can type in anyone's email address to see when they might be available, and then it pops up here. And then when you're done, you just unclick them. Now, do note that anytime you search for someone's calendar, they do, after that point, automatically appear in your list over here. So if it's someone whose calendar you check regularly, that can actually be pretty helpful so that you can find them in a hurry. But let's say you don't want them in your list all the time, you can just click on this next to their name and hit hide this calendar from the list. So it's pretty simple to do that. If you're someone that has access to a lot of calendars on your list that you need to keep track of, one of the tricks that I do is just to put numbers in front of them. Otherwise, it's going to organize it alphabetically, and you can sort of prioritize your calendars there towards the top. So that's the basics of the types of calendars that you can manage, and having multiple calendars can be helpful, let's say for a staff or for an events calendar for your community. So those are just some different ways that you can do that. There's also different settings that you can do inside your calendars. So if I take as an example one that I have created, I can choose to share this calendar with other people. So I might give my staff editing access, but I might only give my residents view access. And then you can do various other things in settings, changing your name, changing the description. A lot of that is fairly self-explanatory. So earlier in the Gmail module, we talked about tasks and got a little bit into that. In addition to popping up over here, you have a complete list over here on your right where you can see all the tasks that you have coming up. Again, it's fairly handy to view it in that particular way. Also, in both this and in the Gmail function, you can sort it in different ways. So I tend to like to sort mine by due date. That way they appear in a very manageable fashion over here as well. The last thing that I will mention is the search feature. So much like in Gmail, if you need to search for a particular email, you can type it in the search bar. Let's say you need to search for an event, or maybe all of the events that you have done within a particular time frame. So this is just a real quick way to find out if you can't remember when a meeting occurred, but you remember the name of the meeting or maybe who was there, you can easily find out that information. So let's say I want to know when all of my staff meetings were. I can type in staff meeting, and any event that has staff meeting in it or maybe has staff meeting in its description to some degree is going to start to pop up there. Typically only goes back so far depending on the number of events that you have, but it is a way that you can sort of navigate and find events that might have disappeared from your list. So that's the basics of Google Calendars, and please stay tuned for our next series where we're going to talk about Google Drive.